Welcome back. Today we are continuing our coverage of your local election headquarters, and joining us now is State Representative Dan Brady. Thank you so much. You're running for re-election.
Thank you, Gene. Yes, I am running for re-election in the 105th Legislative District, State Representative.
Always good to have you here.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Start and talking about running for re-election.
Yes.
Right. You've been in office for quite some time now.
Yes.
I believe since 2001. 19 years at this point.
Correct.
What is your biggest point when it comes to term limits, right? What would be your biggest argument against term limits?
Well, I think on a couple fronts. Number one, with term limits. One, I am not an advocate of trying to tell the people who they should or should not be electing and how long, and negotiate with the fact that how long someone may or may not stay. I think especially when you run in a House district, every 2 years you stand in front of the people, and the people have the process called an election to make their decision of what they want to do. The most recent election, the last election cycle that I went through, individuals who were the electorate, they chose to give me a term extension, not a term limit. And I think it's good that you stand before the people that often, and they make their decision. I think to negotiate the fact that you only be somewhere for a certain time, or say you only do this or this or that, really kind of gives the air parents that you know more than the voters, and that if you navigate and craft something a certain way, maybe the voters will buy into something. If other you just stand and say, you know, I'm running for office, I'm asking to earn your trust, and you decide how long I'll be somewhere if I want to keep running myself.
What would you say has been your biggest accomplishment in that span? I mean, for that duration of time that you've been in office, what would you say we would tell people, this is what I've been able to achieve?
Well, I think on a couple fronts. Number one, higher education, and some of the things we've been able to accomplish in higher education, especially focusing in on trying to help students in their debt, expansion of the MAP grants, looking at the new AIM High program, all designed in higher education, of which I'm my minority spokesman on the Appropriations Committee, all designed to try and help students with their debt. Number two, I think some of the things that we've done on the insurance side of things and trying to protect the consumer. And number three, individual policy legislation that I played a role in was back when identity theft was at its height, and looking at, in particular, not only trying to prevent identity theft and help in that area, but how do we restore somebody's credit rating after their identity has been stolen and their entire credit side of things has been ruined. That's where we had legislation I was very proud of to be part of, to help try and restore that for the individual that had been harmed.
One of the issues facing the state of Illinois is a lot of people are leaving the state of Illinois. There's been tons of different studies that looks at how many people have been departing and moving elsewhere, and Illinois is ranked among one of the top states for people departing the area. What can be done to first stop people from leaving, and then even attracting people to Illinois?
Well, I think number one, if you look at what's been done in higher education and the stabilization of trying to help those numbers of some of our best and brightest, and the outsourcing, if you will, going elsewhere for higher ed, and some of the things we've done, and what I just talked about, a creation of a new AIM High program, the funding side of things to help students manage and have the least amount of debt as possible. That's one area. Then you look at business. What we have to do is we have to continue to try and let the majority party know and hopefully understand that when we look at serious workers' compensation reform packages, since I've helped try to negotiate over the last several years, is very, very important, and how government can stay off the back of its business. Those are all things that are important. We have some great businesses that stay here in Illinois that have been able to expand in Illinois. We want to obviously keep them in Illinois, but we want to recruit more. And when you have the infrastructure that we do, meaning roads, and the access in and out of, and the transportation side of things from airports, etc., companies want to do business here in Illinois. We got to make it as business friendly as possible. And one of the ways that you do that is from a regulation standpoint to keep government off the backs of people. And that's been a challenge in Springfield.
You mentioned that a lot of people point to taxes and the height of taxes. The governor is really pushing the progressive income tax that's coming in. Double-ended question for you on this point. Can you clarify for people who may not know your position on the progressive income tax, and do you think that it will actually pass, and if it does, what will happen?
Well, first off, I was a no. I voted no on the graduated income tax. I don't believe that the actual plateau of those who can pay on the higher end of things is going to be enough to sustain what's trying to be brought in by revenue. And so that means I think that particular number will shift to the middle class, the very people it's trying to help protect. And so I think it's going to be very similar to New York, to where the actual focus was for the higher end, and it ended up hurting the middle class because there wasn't enough for the higher end. I think the same thing here is of great concern. So I was a no. I think that the rates have fluctuated back and forth of what someone's truly going to be paying. That was a concern of mine. Now, I'm glad it's going to go before the voters in the November general election on a constitutional amendment question, and we'll see what the voters decide. I don't have the crystal ball of what's going to happen or not happen, but I'm very concerned about the fact that in a couple of areas. Number one, that it's going to be something that doesn't end up hurting the middle class, and number two, the idea that the governor has talked about in his proposed budget that he will hold back a certain percentage of dollars, that if that doesn't pass, that money will be held back to try and help balance the budget. I don't think talking about more or less holding dollars hostage when we have a July 1st budget deadline to be implemented, a May 31st deadline, but July 1st it goes out, and then looking at the fact that's not going to be on the ballot until November. So we have to work with the majority party, and we have to come up with the way that we're not going to rely on what happens with that graduated income tax one way or the other.
And what does that look like? I know the governor has said that utilizing the money that we're getting from marijuana sales and now gambling within the state should
Correct.
also help offset a lot of the expenses within the state. What does it look like reaching a compromise when a huge portion of the budget from Governor Pritzker is based on the idea that the progressive income tax were to pass? How do you reach that knowing that is not something that you believe should be done?
Well, I think we just take a little brief turn to what we've just done in 2020 for this budget. We had at the 11th hour, and I'm advocating and have been with many of my colleagues, that we start on this much sooner than the month of May, when it's traditional in Springfield to craft a budget. We had a bipartisan budget. We had a budget with no new taxes and a budget that was balanced. Now, we had $1.5 billion of new revenues that came in, stronger revenues than we had anticipated, but we did that with no new taxes in the 2020 budget. It can be done. We showed how it can be done. House Republicans helped negotiate into the Capitol bill and out of the Capitol bill over $600 million in taxes, new taxes, that the administration and the majority party wanted. We were able to negotiate that down and negotiate those out. Things like a real estate transfer tax, things like a bottled water tax, things like a beer, liquor, and wine tax, satellite tax, ride-sharing tax, you name it. We negotiated all those out. Over $600 million of new taxes we were able to negotiate out. And we did that in a variety of ways, of having communication, actually being at the table and show why these things were bad and how we can live within our means of the revenue that we had. And we did it. We can do the same thing again. We don't need to have what's proposed to be the highest budget in the state of Illinois with an increase of $2.2 billion potentially in spending. We have to stop it, and we'll do everything we can from the House Republican caucus to do that.
There's been a lot of questions on, I mean, it's over decades now, but really it continues to reach its height on something to be done with gun violence within the state. It seems more and more we have school shootings, mass shootings across the country. Should something be done as far as providing more gun regulation, more gun laws to protect people within our country, or do we already have the things in place?
Well, I think we have a lot of safeguards in place and legislation we presently have, the FOID card, et cetera. Background checks. I think that where we are lacking is the individual employee-wise to make that happen of laws that are already on the books. Now, I am pro Second Amendment. I'm an individual, a hunter myself, and A rating from the NRA. But I believe that where there's a correlation is the mental illness side of things when it comes to some of these horrific shootings that you've seen. I authored and have pushed a House resolution to try and set a task force together dealing with psychotropic drugs and the relationship to some of these shootings and what's being prescribed in the way of psychotropic drugs to individuals. And I think there is a correlation there. On the other side of things, it's the constitutional right. It's your Second Amendment right to carry and bear arms. But I think that what we have on the books, if we could just address that correctly on the safeguards, on the backgrounds, that there's ample legislation there and protection there, but we got to do a better job of the implementation of it.
Fair maps.
Fair maps.
Right now, we're getting close to the census that's going to take place, and that would dramatically change how things look within our districts and Central Illinois in particular as well, particularly like the congressional districts, et cetera. Supporting fair maps, how do we actually get it done, and what's taking so long?
Well, that'll be very interesting because, number one, Governor Pritzker had said in his reelection mode that he was supportive of the fair map proposal. I've been a proponent of the fair map proposal. The House Republican Caucus has been a member of the fair map proposal. The Speaker, Speaker Madigan, draws the maps. That's what will happen again. There has been a couple different opportunities in drives, if you will, petition drives and work by so many to try and change that process, to change it to something like Iowa and follow more of the technology side of things, the computer-driven population bases of districts and what have you, not the traditional political way. I'm certainly for that. That has not occurred yet in Illinois, and it's going to be very difficult to get it that way. But I think you will see our caucus push and remind the governor that he was for fair maps, and as we get closer to that, to see if we can actually get that done. But certainly the majority party has not been in favor of that, and that's going to make it very difficult coming from the minority.
You say it's difficult, but do you think that it will actually take place this time?
I don't know that it's going to take place this time for this draw, this remap cycle. I think a lot of it will be interesting to see what the governor signs or doesn't sign, and what type of pledge, if you will, or discussion that he had, and what he's reminded about, and what he comes to do when it comes time to sign that actual proposal. I know we'll be voting for fair maps.
All right, last question I have for you. Just a reminder to people, or anything that you would like to say as far as why people should reelect you to fill this position.
Sure. I've had the honor to represent the 105th District. I've been very approachable, accessible, and reliable. I've been the type of individual that comes back after that election's over, back to your community, whether that be a fundraising event, whether that be something for the schools, the fire department, pancake and sausages, wherever. And I'm an individual who's accessible and listens. That's number one. Number two, I know the people, and they know me, and they're comfortable with that. They just recently gave me a term extension, as I said, in the last election cycle, against the same individual I'm running against this time. And the reality is that I've been conservative in my approach when it comes to government, but reality, knowing that we have to negotiate and work with the majority party to get things done. When we got things done in the capital bill, of which I was supportive of, the infrastructure bill, which talked about the increase in the gas tax, we haven't done anything since 1990 in this state. And I've got needs over in the 105th District, like many of my colleagues do across the state, with the Illinois State University and building, with the roads and bridges, and over $170-some million will be coming to the 105th District to deal with roads, bridges, and the infrastructure needs in the state. I have voted against every proposed pay raise when I've had the opportunity to do so. The most recent pay raise that was brought up was something that became automatic because the bill that I was on is one of the co-sponsors was never called. And so therefore, I was left to do one thing: return, after I pay taxes on the money, return that increase back to the state treasury, of which I did last year when the first check came out. And so there's a lot of rhetoric that goes on in campaigns, and that's what, is part on some people. The reality is I think it's very important that the electorate does fact check and really looks at things. I've been part of what has been an overall conservative approach endorsed by the Chicago Tribune, the Illinois Farm Bureau, pro-life, and I think all those things speak to my ability to get things done at Springfield for my district, for the people I represent, and the accessibility that I offer and the constituent services that I offer. I think that's an individual that works on behalf of the people, and that's what I try and do every day, and they've been responsible.
All right, State Representative Brady, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.